Rewriting formulas. A formula is a type of literal equation. A literal equation is an equation with two or more variables. To solve for one of the variables, you're going to be using the inverse operations. So here is an example. We want to solve for a variable z. Now, a couple notes. When you're doing literal equations or rewriting formulas, it is very important that you use the right case of letter. If it has capital, it needs to stay capital. If it's lowercase, it needs to be lowercase. Now in this case, I have a capital H equals 1/4 z. And I want to get z by itself. And I see here I have 1/4 attached to z. So that means that I want to get rid of the 1/4 so that I have z by itself. I want it to have a coefficient of 1. Well, in order to get rid of the 1/4, I'm going to multiply by its reciprocal, which would be 4 over 1, and 4 over 1 is simply 4. So when I multiply both sides by 4, I'm going to get rid of that 1/4 that's in front of the z, and I'm always going to put whatever number it is in front of the variable, because remember, it's the coefficient. So in this case, z will equal 4 times capital H. So when you have a number that you're multiplying by, you always want to make sure that it's in front of the variable. In this case, we want to solve for t. So in order to get t by itself, I need to remove that r. I need to move it to the other side. And remember, when something is attached, that is multiplication, and the inverse operation would be division. So in this case, I want to divide both sides by r to remove that r, and my new formula for t would equal t equals d divided by r. Now this is an example where I have a fraction and a variable attached to the variable I want to solve for. I'm trying to get h here by itself. Well, whenever you have a fraction, that's the first movement you want to make. And again, this is 1/2. The inverse would be 2 over 1, which is simply 2. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 to remove that 1/2 on the side that the h is on. You always want to make sure that you put the number in front of the variable. So we end up having 2a equals the bh. So you want to remove the fraction first, and so I multiply both sides by 2. The number goes in front of the letter, so I have 2a, capital A. And now I want to remove the b because I'm trying to get h by itself. And again, this is multiplication. The inverse operation would be division. So I'm going to divide both sides by b. That's going to remove that b with the h. And my new formula, or h equals 2 capital A divided by b. Pause and try. So in this case, I wanted to get x by itself, so I'm dividing both sides by capital A, and I get my x equals capital BY all over capital A. Pause and try. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of the fraction, and again, 1/3, the inverse is 3, so I'm multiplying both sides by 3. Remember to put the 3 in front of the variable, so I end up having 3b equals qs, and now I'm going to divide through by s so I can get q by itself. And the solution here is 3 capital B divided by s. So now here's another example, and I want to get x by itself, and I have this plus 3. Now the inverse for addition would be subtraction. So in this case, I want to move the 3 over by subtracting it from both sides. Now be really careful here, because when you're subtracting 3 from y, you don't attach it to y. It's not a negative 3y, because then that would mean multiplication. So in this case, you're going to rewrite this horizontally. So you end up having y minus 3 equals x. So our formula would be x equals the y minus 3. So be really careful with addition and subtraction that you don't attach. In this case, I want to move that a over, it's a minus a, so the inverse would be plus a. And again, I'm adding it to both sides of the equal sign. I'm not attaching it to y, I'm just rewriting that horizontally. So y plus a will equal x. So my formula for x is y plus a. So be really careful that you do not attach it to the variable, that you rewrite it using the sign that the variable is. Now this case you have to be careful. I want to get x by itself, but I see I have 5 minus x. Now that 5 is positive, therefore in order to move it, I need to subtract it from both sides. And we have y minus 5, I'm not attaching it to y, I'm just rewriting it horizontally. Y minus 5 equals a negative x, because that minus sign has to come down with that x. So you're not done until x is by itself or have a coefficient of a positive 1. So in this case, I need to get rid of that negative. And remember that negative really represents a negative 1. So that I'm dividing everything by that negative 1. That'll change that x to a positive x. And then it changes the signs of everything on the other side. So that positive y turns into a negative y. And that minus 5 turns into a plus 5. Pause and try. So you see here I'm adding b to both sides, and I get y plus b equals x. Pause and try. So you see I'm subtracting 5 from both sides, and I get y minus 5 equals x. Pause and try. So the first thing I needed to do here is subtract s from both sides, and I still have that negative with the r, so I'm going to have to divide through by a negative 1, which is going to change the signs of everything, which I end up with a negative q plus s. Now here's an example where there would be 2 steps in order to isolate the variable. Similar to a 2-step equation, you always want to undo the plus or minus first and then do what's attached to the variable. So in this case, I'm trying to solve for x, and I see that I have a plus b. The inverse operation of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract b from both sides. Again, you want to be careful. You're not attaching it to c. It's c minus b. So you're just rewriting that horizontally. And now I want to get rid of the a that's attached to the x. And when something's attached, it is the opposite would be division. So I'm going to divide by a. But be careful, because when you're dividing by a, you need to make sure you divide the entire side, the c minus b by the a. And how that's represented here is putting the line all the way across. So you're not just dividing one letter, you're dividing the whole expression c minus b by a. So this is our new formula for x. X would equal c minus b divided by a. Pause and try. So the first thing you're doing is subtracting b from both sides. Now you're going to divide through by m. Our new formula would be y minus b all over m. Here's another example of rewriting a formula where we have 2 steps in order to solve for the variable. And you have to be careful, because when you see something attached to a variable, we think we have to divide. But because it's not attached to the variable we're solving for, in this case we're trying to solve for w, we want to get w by itself. So I have to move the 2l over. And because 2l in this case is positive, I have to do the inverse operation, which is subtract or negative. So I'm going to subtract 2l from both sides. And that will be rewritten. Again, I'm not attaching it to p. I'm just rewriting it. It's p minus 2l equals the 2w. Now I want to get rid of the 2 that's attached to the w, and because it's attached, it's multiplication, and the inverse would be division. Pause and try. Now, when you have something that looks like this, where we're trying to get to the y that's on top, so I have by plus 2 all over 3. In order to get to that top, I need to first get rid of that division. That 3 is dividing into that entire expression. And the inverse operation of division is multiplication. So when I'm doing this, I want to multiply both sides by 3. Now that's what's going to cancel out that 3. And that expression that's on top is just going to come out. So I put parentheses around it to represent that it is one piece that goes together. And that when I multiply by 3, that's going to cancel out that division piece, that 3. And remember, when you multiply, you have to multiply to both sides. So I'm multiplying 3 to that c, and the coefficient or a number always needs to go in front of the variable. So when I rewrite that, I end up with 3c. So now I have by plus 2 equals 3c, and now I can actually solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, and then you're going to divide through by that b. So be careful when you have an expression being divided by a number. by plus 2 is being divided by 3. I have to first get rid of that 3 in order to get that expression by itself. And then you can work on getting the variable by itself. Pause and try. Again, I'm getting that expression by itself. I want to remove that 3 by multiplying, and you put that 3 in front of k. And now you're going to get rid of the 5 by adding it, and then you're going to divide through by 4. So your new formula for f would equal 3k plus 5, all divided by 4. Now in this case, we see we're solving for a variable v. And v happens to be the divisor. It's in the denominator. So in order to solve for it, we need to first bring it up. And to bring it up, you need to multiply. The opposite of division is multiplication. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I multiply so that I can get the v to the top. And I end up with v capital D equals m. And now I can solve for v. So in this case, to get v by itself, I'm going to divide through by capital D. And my new formula would be v equals m divided by d. So be careful when the variable's in the denominator or in the divisor. You're going to have to first bring it up in order to solve for it. And to bring it up, the opposite would be multiplication. Pause and try. So you multiply both sides by b, and then you're going to divide through by r, and you get your solution b equals 3 divided by r.